So last week, we journeyed a bit with Moses. And Moses found himself a little bit down on his luck after he fled Egypt. And he found himself in much different circumstances than he had experienced as a prince of Egypt. He was now a shepherd in the country in a foreign land. And when this shepherd found himself standing in front of a burning bush, hastily untying his sandals, and hearing God tell him that God had chosen him to lead God's people out of slavery and to the promised land, Moses said, "Who am I to lead them?" Moses would be the last person welcome in Pharaoh's presence. And I imagine that the Israelites wouldn't be too pleased to talk to him either. Who is Moses to negotiate freedom from slavery? He's not qualified. But God tells Moses that Moses' qualifications are not important to God. God tells Moses, "I'm going to be with you." It's not God's feelings about Moses' qualifications that are important. It doesn't matter that Moses has no idea how to get the people out of Egypt or where they're going to go when they get out. What matters is that God has promised to journey with them. God will be with them and nothing else matters. But that's still a little difficult for Moses to accept. And so in today's scripture, Moses asks God this question: what if I go to the Israelites and I tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you? And they say, "What is his name?" What am I going to tell them? And now, this seems like a silly question. Both Moses and the Israelites know exactly what God they're talking about when they say the God of our fathers or the God of our ancestors. But it's really not a silly question at all. When Moses says, "Who are you?" he's not asking God to identify that he is the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. What he's really saying when he says, "Who are you?" is, who are you to go up against Pharaoh? Who are you to tell the Israelites that they're going to be set free? Who are you to promise them a land of their own? This isn't a question of identity. This is a question about power and authority. Because in Egypt, Pharaoh had all of the power. As the supreme ruler of the people, the Pharaoh was believed to be God on earth. The Pharaoh was the high priest of every temple in Egypt. The Pharaoh was a god. And Moses did not want to get involved in a turf war between two gods, especially when it seemed very possible that he might end up on the losing side. So Moses is asking God, "Who are you to go into Pharaoh's turf and take him on?" When the people hear your name versus Pharaoh, who are they going to side with? Now, God has asked this kind of a question several times in Scripture, and God reacts differently to Moses than he does to other people. So I think that God sees this as a valid question coming from Moses. And so his answer to Moses' question, "Who are you to send me?" is just a matter-of-fact answer. I am who I am. Now, this is where we run into a limitation of the English language. English does not have the same tense that the statement is made in Hebrew. If you are a grammar nerd, it's called first person singular imperfect. And basically, when we say something in first person singular imperfect, we mean that I exist in the present, I exist in the future, I exist in all time. So the translation might be, I will be who I am, or I am who I will be, or I exist and I always will exist. In Egypt, Pharaoh will be Pharaoh today. And even after Pharaoh dies, people believed that the Pharaoh was eternal. Any person off the street at the mall today, any person can probably name more Egyptian pharaohs than they can prime ministers of Canada. Think about that. Except for maybe the cute one might have gotten a little bit of notice. People in our community can probably name more pharaohs than they can prime ministers of Canada. In Egypt, Pharaoh is the end all and a be all. And when God makes the declaration, I am who I am, he is essentially one-upping Pharaoh. That Pharaoh dude, he is no concern to me whatsoever. I am who I am. God tells Moses that God has heard the cries of the Israelites and that God is going to send Moses to save them from slavery in Egypt. But there's just one catch. God knows that Pharaoh knows that Pharaoh is the end all and be all, the most powerful, the most charismatic in Egypt. And God knows that Pharaoh is not going to give up without a spectacular fight. Pharaoh won't quit unless he's KO'd. And when God says that he will have to strike the Egyptians, again, there's a language thing there that we don't understand. He doesn't mean hit, he means knock out. I will have to strike the Egyptians. When Moses killed the Egyptian, which was the event that led him to flee from Egypt in the first place, when Moses killed that Egyptian, the language was the same word, strike, KO. God isn't just saying that he's going to have to give the Egyptians a smackdown. He's saying he's going to have to smite them. He's going to change their world and save the Israelites. God is, and God always will be. Pharaoh, on the other hand, is about to have a very rude awakening. And I think that most of us have an idea of what happens later, what's coming up next. And if not, we'll be covering it in the next few weeks. Suffice it to say that Pharaoh and the Egyptians get God's point by the time the Israelites leave. The last Pharaoh died just about the time that Jesus' parents were born. There has not been a Pharaoh since. But throughout the last 2,000 years, there have been many Pharaoh figures. Each one is incredibly powerful. Each one influences what people do and why people do the things that they do. Some pharaohs are organizations or companies or governments. Some are leaders or rulers. But here's the catch. We live in a great country. But that country has only been around for 10% of the 2,000 years that have passed since the last Pharaoh. Even though I imagine that none of us can contemplate a time at which there would be no United States of America, the fact is that God can and God remembers. Our world is real. There is power there. But we are a young country, and we make mistakes sometimes that young people make. We have not always been, and God always was, and God always will be. And the most powerful person in this world cannot bully God, cannot beat God, cannot even squeeze past God. And God doesn't even have to smite them, because time will. And so we are called to keep our focus on the great I am. We are called to name our ultimate concern as the great I am. The world is full of powerful people searching for more power, our power, through television and Facebook and Twitter. They may take some of our power for a time, but they will never be the one who was and is to be. And we have to choose who we are going to give our power to. There are lots of powers in this world. There are lots of thrones, but there is only one King of Kings. And that king does not live in the White House or in Buckingham Palace or the Kremlin. The great I am is everywhere, all the time. God is. Beware of pretenders. Beware of the power hungry. Take off your shoes, because the ground that you are on is holy. Worship is so important to us as Christians. Worship is one of the ways that we get a clearer glimpse of the I amness of God. Worship is one of the ways that we clarify whom we will serve and to whom we will give our power. The great I am is everywhere, all the time. Today we have a special invitation to those who would like to join North Christian or be baptized. We will have a baptism on Easter. If you would like to come forward today, there are already 2 people who are coming, so you will not be alone. You are welcome to join us up front as we sing from the red hymnal, "We Will Glorify," number 118.